Hi, and welcome to the sixth day of Captario's 10-year celebration series. My name is Karl Rahn, and today we're going to sit down together with Captario's Head of Analytics, Magnus Ytterstad, and Senior Analyst Emma Samuelsson to talk about modeling perspectives and dependencies. What does it mean to account for dependencies in decision-making? How does the perspective we approach a problem with influence our final decision? These are some of the questions we'll be talking about. Now let's go talk to Emma and Magnus. Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
It's great to see you both.
You too.
And I've been looking forward to this discussion. Anytime I sit with Emma and Magnus, I think it's an opportunity to learn something new. So, and I know understanding dependencies, I have an idea in my head, and certainly the perspectives that go into the way we handle our client interactions and our internal interactions. But so I'm very much interested to start this conversation, and I think I'm just going to throw it out there to either one of you. Could you talk and explain to us a little bit more about how dependencies are accounted for in our processes here in our discussions?
Yeah, I can start.
Sure.
Yeah. So I can give you an example. In a project deep dive, we often model their development plan. And it's quite common they want to look at different strategies or scenarios. How can an activity affect the outcome of another activity? Or what is the dependency of a delay, for example, in another activity? And we can set up different strategies to look at that.
How would that look? What kind of different? Could you give us an example of two strategies potentially?
Well, let's say one would be we run a slow track. We run a phase 2 and a phase 3 study and go directly to registration. Or we can have another path where we run a more aggressive path and we skip the phase 2 and go directly into phase 3.
Yeah, such a simple way to describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works out very well. Magnus, could you add to that a little bit? Things that you've seen that are things that are dependent on each other that you've worked with lately? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. On the portfolio scale of things, dependencies are always there. In oncology, for instance, we have dependencies between different projects. We want to create a product from two different compounds. Then those two compounds, when they're in development, are dependent on each other. If one of them fails, the entire product fails. And that has implications on both of them. Another example from the portfolio world might be when we have leads and backup compounds. So if the lead compound makes it all the way, then we're going to drop the backup. The backup is very dependent on what happens in the lead project. And we try to model that in our portfolio scope of things, because it adds a lot of risk to the portfolio, and it's important to bring that up to the surface.
That's great. So from a portfolio standpoint, we could see many examples where that would come in play in terms of, that's great. Yeah,
absolutely.
And from an asset standpoint, those decisions on what's happening in phase 1, phase 2, and approval, and just the whole life cycle of the asset, certainly. So those are two more R&D focused perspectives. So let's talk about different perspectives and what happens with dependencies and how we approach it, because it's not just the research and development standpoint that we look at.
We look at a lot of different perspectives. So in helping teams to make decisions or to help the portfolio stakeholders to make decisions, we're looking at a lot of different perspectives. If we have a composition of a portfolio, we want to look at the revenue, the potential future revenue of that portfolio. Can we meet our targets? What's the cost implications? Can we afford to develop this portfolio that we have selected? And can we meet targets in terms of a number of new product launches, that we're covering certain disease areas might be part of our corporate strategy, not just the R&D strategy. And we want to be able to answer all of those questions. And so when we're making a decision about a portfolio or an asset, it's important to look at a lot of different perspectives: revenue, cost, risk, value, volume of projects in different phases of development. It's a lot of things to look at. And we try to kind of bring all of that together into a composite view where you can look at one of these and we also have metrics that take into account all of them. And so they are sort of composite metrics such as NPV, ROI, take into account all of these things.
That's great. That's great. So from a financial standpoint, meeting the goals that are set forth in terms of it could be something as simple as product launches. We have this goal and we want to hit it. So we can take a look at that in a very dynamic way.
Yes, absolutely.
Through dependencies. That's great.
Yeah. So we can start with a high-level metric or high-level metrics, and we can compare different compositions of a portfolio or different development paths in an asset and look at the high-level metrics. And then we can break that down into what does that mean in terms of revenue, what does it mean in terms of costs, number of projects, and so forth and so on. So we want to look at this at different levels, and we want to look at a lot of different perspectives, not just the financials.
And so these different areas of the business within drug developers, so they exist, whether it's finance, the C-suite or R&D, business development, as separate entities. So how is it communicating across these different business areas?
Well, it can be a challenge because if you look at the cost side, that's normally the finance departments. And if you look at the durations of an activity, that is more the development part. And they don't always speak to each other. So it's a challenge to bring all those inputs together.
Interesting.
It helps, though, having the full holistic view of a project or a portfolio. That helps with that because then everyone is looking at the same thing. You can pinpoint, you can look at the financial aspects of things. You can look at what the project is interested in, which is probably more around timelines and launch dates and so on. But if you have the same source of data for everyone to look at, that definitely helps.
Yeah. So that's great. So you're increasing the connectivity between those business units within your clients.
Yeah, I would say that we do.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, so that's excellent. So we learned a little bit about the asset level dependencies and what's important there, and with you, Magnus, the portfolio perspectives and what goes into understanding the dependencies that are important to the people that are responsible for portfolio strategic decision making and planning. Is there anything else that you can think of that would influence the decision making? Emma, I could throw that out to you.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of important aspects, but one of them could be the competitors. So it's really important to take competitors into account. When are they planning to launch, and how does that affect our strategy? And then we have the orphan drug status, which is something that a lot of companies are focusing on. And also we have the fast track designation. Those are a few examples.
Yeah, excellent. Anything to add from a portfolio standpoint that comes to mind, Magnus?
No, I think we'll have already talked about different perspectives. The financial, the revenue perspective, meaning revenue targets. There are also meaning launch targets and covering of different disease areas. The most important part, of course, is how many patients do we reach with our therapies. And that can also, of course, be modeled and reported on. We have things like QALYs and DALYs that we can use to put quantitative metrics on those.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Again, I've learned something new, as I have been all week. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I thank you both for putting a more practical definition on perspectives and dependencies. So, and thank you, everyone, for watching and listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.